connecting the dots between supply and demand. This session will explore ways to connect the dots between supply and demand for counterfeit and pirated goods. How could recent endeavors by law enforcement agencies and the private sector address this issue? The role of intermediaries, public-private partnerships for timely and accurate exchange of information as a key element to increase supply chain security. Now, I'd like to invite the moderator, Mr. Paul Rawlinson, Partner, IP Department, Baker & McKenzie, to introduce the speakers and moderate the panel. Welcome.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for resisting the delights of Istanbul on this sunny day to stay with our agenda. I'd like to think that this session on supply chain issues is at the heartbeat of the theme of this Congress, evolving challenges and innovative responses. It's an area that was the subject of the last Congress, and I'm pleased to say that we've had quite a bit of innovation and change in this area over the last year or so, and our speakers will in turn address the issue from their perspective. I just wanted to start with a few overall thoughts. First, some quite scary statistics. The Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, the OECD, has estimated that more than $250 billion in physical counterfeit goods, that's leaving aside piracy, move across borders worldwide each year. A further study by Frontier Economics, which is an organization which was commissioned by ICC's BASCAP group, the Business Action to Stop Anti-Counterfeiting and Piracy. This report estimates that by 2015, the total annual value of counterfeiting and piracy may top a staggering $1.7 trillion. I don't even know how many noughts there are in 1.7 trillion, but there's a lot. Now, moving to the role of the intermediaries, it really is clear that criminals who manufacture, distribute and sell fake goods are using more sophisticated production and distribution channels. In more and more cases, these supply channels created and used by criminals are as sophisticated and as complex as those used by IPR owners themselves. And this supply chain isn't just looking at the end of the supply chain. It goes to the raw materials, the sourcing, the shipping and the couriering of goods, the involvement of financial intermediaries in financing these transactions, the retail outlets where these goods are sold, as well as the online equivalents to all of these routes to market. So really the counterfeit trade looks and feels very much the same as the legitimate one. And we even see that there isn't necessarily so much of a difference in price sometimes. In some markets, there is an imitation of the goods to the point where they price them just below the leading brand equivalent. So, as players in the conduit of this illegal activity, these groups of intermediaries, I would suggest, have a responsibility to assist in eliminating it. And most legitimate intermediary players don't want to do business with criminals involved in counterfeiting and piracy, and recognize that their best interests are served by assisting in the prevention of the contamination of these supply channels. And we've seen some good action. These players have started to take voluntary actions through codes of conduct and have a shared responsibility with the brand owners to do something about this trade. Other steps are being taken through government action, legal redress is available in certain cases, and other measures. ICC's BASCAP group will soon be publishing a report on the role and responsibility of intermediaries in the supply chain. And this report, which you should all watch out for, will look at the cutting-edge developments in this area and highlight some potential future trends. As lawyers working with BASCAP on this project, Baker McKenzie has undertaken a study of some 51 countries wide on the role and responsibilities of intermediaries. And as I said in the Paris Congress last time, the results of this survey serve to reinforce the fact that there is a role and a responsibility for different players in the supply chain together with the IPR owners. So this is the core issue that we want to explore in this session, but there are two related topics that the speakers will address. And it's two areas of engagement. First, the need for public-private cooperation in this area, both in the use of tracking and tracing technology, but also a modus operandi on how public and private can work together to share information for the effective enforcement cross borders that we're seeking. And the second point, which brand owners would like to think about perhaps, is their own supply chain and how secure is their own supply chain with an IP perspective. Is it really at the heart of your audit and compliance functions, and should more be done to secure your own supply chains? So those are the themes that the panel will address. I'd now like to introduce the speakers and then invite them to come and say a few words in turn. My first is Darcy Quinn at the end, to my left, far left. Darcy began his anti-counterfeiting enforcement for the Danone Group in Asia, eliminating counterfeit factories there and in North Africa, stopped grey and counterfeit goods of illicit food products between the US and the EU. He then moved on to Merck, Sharp and Dome in the Middle East, where he was involved in similar activities, and also involved as a director of the Pharmaceutical Security Institute, representing 22 pharma companies overseeing counterfeit investigations. His investigative work in Mexico led to a proposal to the US Congress to make counterfeit medicines a priority for the US Food and Drug Administration. So clearly it's done some cutting-edge stuff in this area. After a stint in the tobacco industry, he's now at the CropLife International Group, which is a consortium of agrochemical companies and government bodies, representing them in the fight against counterfeit and illegal pesticides, which I'm sure you'll appreciate is a pretty grubby thing to be doing. So I look forward to Darcy's further thoughts on this topic. After Darcy will be Bilawal, who is second to my left, who is a graduate of the University of Punjab in Lahore. He joined the Pakistan Post Office in 1982 and served there until 1996. He's been with the International Bureau of the Universal Postal Union since 1996, and for the last 8 years Bilawal has worked in the Customs and Transport area at the UPU, and now is Programme Manager for Customs and Transport. He's also Secretary of the WCO UPU Contact Committee, and this is the committee that deals with issues that are common to the Post and Customs, primarily managed through that committee, and also ensuring that the WCO has a voice on UPU issues. Third, I'll turn to Daniel Hubert. Daniel has an electrical engineering degree and worked in financial services for both multinational organisations and management consultants. Daniel's in the middle of the panel. Since then, he's joined British American Tobacco in 2000 as Global Programme Office Manager for IT, and has since held a number of programme management roles, including leading the development and implementation of BAT's Global HR Template and Global Track and Trace System. He became Head of Supply Chain Tracking and Verification at BAT in 2009, focused on developing solutions that secure BAT's supply chain and meet regulatory requirements. Currently, he is BAT's primary representative in the Digital Coding and Tracking Association, working with other multinational tobacco manufacturers on supply chain security solutions. This is a global role promoting integrated product coding standards and solutions that address track and trace, tax verification, product volume verification and authentication. So right at the heart of some of these issues. Fourth, Mr. Takashi Aoki, nearest to me. Mr. Aoki is a Chief Researcher and Lead Assessor at the Japan Electronic Data Interchange Council, JIBDEC. And JIBDEC was established as a non-profit organization in Japan, and since its establishment has worked to advance computer technologies and security of information systems. With the progress of the IT industry, JIBDEC continues to tackle various issues on building platforms and safe and secure IT usage. Today, JIBDEC continues to focus its efforts on developing platforms for the exchange of digital information and is very active in this area of tracking and tracing in the same vein. Mr. Aoki himself holds a BA in electrical engineering. In 1979, he joined Mitsubishi Electric as an expert in information security and joined JIBDEC in 2007, where he is today. And last but not least, Alan Dixon. Alan, penultimate to my left, is a leading lawyer and international specialist in IP and information technology, having worked on 3 continents and advised high-tech and other industries in various capacities for more than 25 years. He worked as General Counsel and Assistant General Counsel positions across those territories. He was European Counsel and Partner at the law firm Covington & Burling in London from 1994 through 1999, representing various companies in the technology industry. From 2000 to 2005, he served as Executive Director and General Counsel of the International Recording Association, the IFPI, in London. Since 2005, he's run a consultancy concentrating on IP and IT issues. He's specialist editor of a favourite book of mine, which is Coppinger on Copyrights in the UK, and therefore very knowledgeable in this sector as well. So with those introductory comments, I'd like to ask Darcy to kick us off with his thoughts. Thank you.
Well, I've been told the timekeeping is going to be ruthless and possibly violent. I've got 6 minutes. I'll try to do it in 3. I think it's important during the course of my investigations to let you know that a lot of these counterfeiters that are out there are in fact using legitimate supply chains in order to deliver the counterfeits. So in other words, who is the counterfeiter? It's not just somebody sitting in a country far away making counterfeit product. They're making the counterfeit product, but that counterfeit product has got to be delivered to the destination country. Who is delivering the counterfeits to the destination country? It's not underground submarines. It's not the mafia, on bicycles going over the Punjab. It is legitimate shipping companies, legitimate vessel companies, legitimate aircraft companies who are unknowingly aiding and abetting the counterfeiters to move the counterfeits from point A, manufacturing source, to point B, destination source. And it's one part of the equation that we haven't focused on. We're always blaming the manufacturing source, and occasionally we blame the demand side, but nobody's looking at the delivery of the counterfeits. And again, the delivery of the counterfeits are not being done underground. They're being brought in by legitimate delivery companies. Frequently, those companies are your very own service providers. So the counterfeiter will never get, because that's organized crime. They're very tough to get. But there's a whole outside circle of legitimate business people who think they're doing the right thing, but who are being duped by the counterfeiters. That is your target. Those are the people that need to be educated. And the wake-up call for me is when we seized 28 tons of counterfeit pesticides coming into the European Union. We caught them. They came in on a very large shipping line, very well known, one of the biggest in the world. They work for most of you. And when it came time to store and destroy these counterfeit pesticides, much to my surprise, guess who ended up picking the bill for storage and destruction? We did. Under EU regulations, the brand owner has to pay for the storage and destruction. This is despite the fact that this legitimate shipping company, huge shipping company, client, who was the counterfeiter, had been paid by the counterfeiter to deliver the counterfeits to the EU, had the money in their pocket, and I said, hey, how about pitching in and helping us out with the storage and destruction costs? They said, no way. I said, what? No way. We have no obligation. I said, you have no obligation to pay for the mess that you've created, and this just doesn't impact the industry of pesticides. This impacts all of you out there. Okay, so they've been paid by the counterfeiter. They refused to pay for the storage and destruction costs. So I said, well, listen, why don't you engage, you and the rest of the vessel companies and the aircraft companies that are delivering the counterfeits into U.S. and EU, why don't you engage in a little due diligence on who your customers are to make sure that you're not working for the counterfeitors? Because they've always said, Mr. Quinn, we don't really know what's in the box. We don't know what's in the container. We're not trademark experts. And I said, you don't need to be trademark experts. You need to know who your customers are. And they said, we don't have to. And I said, why not? I said, because the law doesn't require it. Well, this is the 21st century. Bankers need to know who the customers are. You guys need to know who your customers are. You've got massive audit and compliance departments in your respective companies that spend millions of dollars vetting your own supply chain. I've seen this. Audit and compliance departments want to know who you as corporations are doing business with. But one giant hole that they're missing and that you're missing is the fact that some of your own service providers are also aiding and abetting the counterfeiters, frequently unknowingly, frequently negligently, but the counterfeits are being delivered by legitimate companies to the destination markets, and they're also your service providers. So what is the solution here? Start asking your compliance departments and your audit departments to go down and start asking of their vendors, their service providers that deliver your legitimate product, because the people who are delivering the counterfeits also deliver your own legitimate product, and make sure as a precondition for doing business that the vessel companies and the aircraft companies engage in at least a minimum of due diligence on their customers. It's not going to stop counterfeiting full stop. However, a little question like, here's a 40-foot container. If the vessel company said, who are you? The counterfeiters would just move on to the next vessel company that doesn't ask that question. It's as simple as that. There needs to be due diligence on the part of delivery companies that are also your service providers in knowing who their customers are, and you are empowered to require that they do that because they're also your service providers. So your audit and compliance departments are the biggest allies you have. This is not an IPR issue. This is a business model issue that will work if you empower yourselves to require that your service providers do not aid and abet counterfeiters, and that's a precondition to doing business. That helps you. That helps the vessel companies that are forward-thinking, because they're going to say, listen, if we advertise that we've got a due diligence program, we're going to attract more business from brand owners, you folks out there. And lastly, it's going to help customs, because they're going to know what vessel companies engage in due diligence on their customers and which don't, and they'll know which containers to search. So we'll pick up this. I want to provoke you. I want questions, but the power is in your hands. Stop subsidizing the counterfeiters by picking up the storage and destruction costs. That is a business model that will only increase counterfeiting. It's ridiculous. Your CEOs won't like it, and ultimately your shareholders are going to hate it. So before your audit department calls you, you ought to call them. Thank you.
First of all, I would like to express my thanks to the organizers for inviting the Universal Postal Union and especially the World Customs Organization to participate in this Congress. Under the UPU regulations, counterfeit and prohibited items are prohibited. They are not allowed to be sent to the postal traffic. This is the first important point which I would like to stress upon. The UPU strategy against counterfeit and pirated items is based on two things. First is it encourages post to help customs in identifying counterfeit and pirated items, and secondly, it lays emphasis on awareness raisings. Keeping in mind these two objectives, the UPU had organized pilots in consultation with the local customs. One pilot was organized in Milan in cooperation with Italian customs, and that was focused on the EMS items. The other was organized in cooperation with the French customs, and that was meant for the incoming parcels. These two pilots showed that there was some counterfeit and prohibited items, but not to that extent as depicted. Moreover, UPU had been organizing awareness-raising campaigns in different forms, but the most important thing is the Article 9 of the UPU Convention, which has come into effect. It was adopted by 2012 Congress. It lays emphasis on 3 points. First, all the UPU member countries have been asked to observe security standards. This is for the first time that the security standards had been made compulsory. Previously, it was optional. Secondly, advanced electronic information has to be sent. And thirdly, it also talks about strengthening the aviation security. For the last 6 months, we have been working on developing a postal model to send advanced electronic information. It contains 7 principles. I would quickly run through these principles because they are very closely related to customs and other border control agencies. This advanced electronic information would be based on the CN23, a customs declaration, which has been agreed between WC and UPU, and it would start from the origin post. It will go to the destination post, and from the destination post, this electronic information will be communicated to the destination customs. Destination customs will have 2 opportunities, first at the time of the origin, and then at the time of destination, to examine the advance information of the postal traffic, of the postal items which are coming. This will help them to carry out a very effective risk assessment. How this electronic transmission will take place. This transmission would take place in accordance with the UPU messaging standards, which have been agreed with the World Customs Organizations. And once the mail arrives at the destination customs, I mean the electronic information arrives at the destination customs, there are 3 possibilities. First is that the destination customs will allow us to clear the mail and to send the mail. Second possibility is that they might identify some items which will require further screening. Third possibility is that if there is some dangerous item, then they can send a do not load message. So this postal model has been conceived and approved by the Postal Operation Councils, and the next steps are to hold pilots. So we are planning to organize pilots both within the European Union Customs and European Union Post, you see. We are planning to organize pilots over there and the other part of the world. There are some challenges as well, which I would like to explain. First challenge is the capture of data at the origin. Unlike private couriers, Our clients are mostly a common man, and not the big shipping companies. So how we would capture that, that is a significant challenge. Secondly, we are very conscious of the fact that the customs declarations are not correct or not up to the quality of the customs declaration has to be improved. Third, we have to agree the time span. In what time span we will, there are three players involved. Origin post, destination customs. So in how much time the entire process will be completed. So this time span has to be worked out. What will be the local interface between customs and post at the destinations? UPU has developed a customs declaration system, and which is being applied by the Canada Customs and Canada Post, but this is also an issue. See, we would require a very close cooperation of customs and other border control agencies, because without that, this postal model will not be able to function. And moreover, the UPU, there's a lot of emphasis to be developed or to be given on the capacity building. UPU consists of 192 member countries, developed and least developed. So we need to lay down the infrastructure to make this happen. And lastly, these pilots will also reveal what mechanism has to be applied to overcome the transit issues. Now, just see, the message which I brought from the UPU is positive. We are converting from paper to electronic, which is a major accomplishment. And then you see we are developing this system in close cooperation with the World Customs Organization, International Civil Aviation Organization, IATA, and with regional bodies like the European Union and USCPP. Thank you.
Okay, good afternoon. As Paul said earlier on, I'm talking on behalf of the Digital Coding and Tracking Association, which is formed by the 4 major tobacco manufacturers. What I want to talk to you about very briefly is around connecting the dots in terms of how do we ensure that technologies that can fight the illicit trade are actually implemented successfully. And really the key to this is the need for full public-private partnership. We fully accept that technology in itself is not a silver bullet for fighting illicit trade, but as has been explained by some of the other speakers, it is a key tool and enabler. Okay? It helps you drive compliance through all your intermediaries. It helps set a benchmark of what you should expect the legal trade to actually be able to do in terms of the information you should expect to see as they move product around globally. And with that, it can then give you a very clear view on who isn't legal, who isn't actually playing the game and actually is actually up to no good. The issue we see it is, whilst there are some very good seeds being sown, the WCO have their IPM, the Interface Public Members Access Point. The WCO, as was explained this morning, have got iCheckIt and various access points to work with pharmaceutical and with ourselves, tobacco industry. These are just seeds. Okay? Without clear, coordinated action, they will not grow into fully developed global solutions, which is really what we're aiming for. Now, why is that? What are the issues? The issues are several. One of them is, we as the legal trade have very long, complex supply chains. We cross borders, we cross boundaries. Similarly, the illicit trade have very long, complex supply chains. They are borderless, but also they are made up of multiple different problems. You're talking about smuggling, you're talking about counterfeiting, you're talking about tax evasion. Each of those problems needs a different solution. So one-size-fits-all technology doesn't work. The other component is regulation. The regulators are driving hard, quite rightly, to fight the illicit trade. And they are driving things like, in the tobacco world, the need for track and trace to be implemented. And it's similar in pharmaceutical and other industries. Our concern is there's no articulation of how that should be done. It just talks about what should be done. And again, it's looking at one particular problem. It's looking at smuggling. It doesn't consider tax evasion and counterfeiting. So what we need to do is to try and get over what all those problems, what all those features cause, those issues cause, which is confusion for government. Governments don't understand or have a clear view on how to actually implement technology. At the moment, what they're presented with is a huge demand from regulators, an enormous growing problem with illicit trade, and typically technologies that are offered to them on a piecemeal basis that don't answer these problems. Our view is we have to now have a coordinated approach to help governments overcome that problem and actually implement something that's workable. So before I talk about how we fix the problem, let me try and articulate what I'm actually talking about. What does all this technology mean? Standards, etc., etc. So let me use a very quick comparison. If you look at the telecoms industry, they have a very similar setup, if you like, to most products in terms of the legal supply chain. If you pick up your mobile phone, you expect to be able to go from one country to the next and seamlessly move from one network supplier to the next. Okay? Likewise, you expect to be able to have the same data transmitted from your mobile phone to whoever you're calling, texting, messaging. You want to be able to access the internet any place, any time. You might want an Apple, you might want a Samsung, you might want a Nokia. It doesn't really matter. But the point is they all can access that information in one way, in a seamless way. That is exactly the same thing that we need to achieve if you want to actually create a properly joined up data set, joined up technology, a joined up way of actually enforcing compliance across very long complex supply chains, fighting a very transnational problem that is the illicit trade. Now my point of that is to say this is achievable. The telecoms industry did it by talking about, well, what is the process to switch from network to network? How do we ensure the same data is passed from phone to phone? How do we make sure that whilst you may have a different phone, it can do the same thing, regardless of whether you have an Apple, a Nokia, or a Samsung? We need to do the same thing. My point as well is to say it's complicated, but it's not that complicated. It is achievable. But we have to work in partnership to make it happen. If we want to grow those seeds that have been set by the likes of WCO and Interpol, we need to work collectively to make it happen. To do that, our view is we need to establish a working group that consists of the major stakeholders like the WCO, like Interpol, other interested parties, maybe the regulators even, people like the health organisations in context of tobacco. Similarly, the brand owners, ourselves as tobacco, alcohol, pharmaceutical, anyone who's interested, even agrochemicals. And with that, get the standards organisations involved. GS1, for instance, I know they're talking later on in the conference. We need to sit down collectively and agree what are the processes to ensure that data is shared across our complex supply chains. What is the standards for what governments should expect of legal supply chains to produce in terms of data, in terms of how data is transmitted? That is the only way that we will ensure that we have usable technology that will actually address the problem of illicit trade. Without that, we will not actually get to a proper end game and actually a full, complete solution. My final point is, this is not fantasy. As I said before, this has been achieved in other complex industries. We actually have this working. Okay? There is a stand out at the front, the Codentify stand. This is based on technologies that we've developed as an industry that actually does everything I'm talking about. It enables you to link together track and trace information, tax verification information, and authenticate, using mobile phones across our complex supply chains. All our request is that you now take the baton forward and we set up an active working group to make this happen. Thank you very much.
Generally, a measure like intellectual property negotiation or traceability is mentioned as an anti-counterfeiting. And in traceability, there are a way treating attribute information like production information and manufacturer information, or treating the organization information on the supply chain. Since counterfeiting is a serious and growing problem in the worldwide. Many standards bodies, like ISO, is working. About the standard of the above-mentioned traceability, Japan is editing the interoperability guideline, ISO DIS 16678, as a cover of ISO TC 247 WG3 from December 2010. On the other hand, in United States, National Defense Authorization Act is being revised at the time of the State of the Union address of President Obama in January 2012. This work has spread not only national defense, but to aerospace, nuclear power generation, and automobile. When a foreign company exports the parts registered into Federal Supply Class List 5962, United States Customs and Border Protection now is asking for the traceability of these parts. Seeing this above-mentioned situation, Japanese industries are discussing the progress and response with government observing. This activity is carried out information sharing to US, such like NIST, SEMI, or SAE. So, with GIPTEC, promotion consortium will start it in July 2013, including prototyping construction. Please inform to GIPTEC who wish to participate mailing list. And this information is written in paper, which my colleague, Mr. Kameda and Mr. Hamaguchi has. Please contact them. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon. I'm going to do a little unscientific survey and compare your answers to ones that the conference board did. The conference board did a little survey of 44 multinationals and a whole lot of people last year in looking at the issue of counterfeiting, trade secret theft, and other kinds of intellectual property problems in the supply chain. And in the survey that they did, they said about 43% 43 to 48% of the companies they surveyed said that they suspected, they had reason to believe, they worried at night about the problem potentially of their suppliers or others in their supply chain, their customers, their business partners, their agents, involved in some sort of intellectual property problem that could be a problem for their own company. So if 43 to 48% in the scientific survey said companies are worried about their supply chain ripping them off, I just want to see a few company people here. How many of you are worried that there might just be some problems like that in your supply chain? So quite a few hands across the room. Now the conference board also looked at, so you know, we lawyers, we companies are not fools. We try to do something about this. And so the conference board asked, So of you companies that have suppliers that work in supply chains, how many of you think that the measures you have in place for dealing with your supply chain on IP issues are adequate? So the average was somewhere in the high 30%. So basically 2/3 of the companies are saying they don't think what they're doing is adequate with their supply chain. So those of you that think the existing measures you have for trying to deal with IP in your supply chain are adequate, raise your hand. I don't see any. So this is what I'm going to talk about just for a few minutes here, and that is, what can we do if we lie awake at night worried that something is going terribly wrong? Is there something more than we're doing that we can do about this? So as a lawyer, and having worked in a lot of different companies and with different industries, I can tell you what at least my experience has been of how we do this. So we lawyers are very good at getting our rights registered. So we spend a lot of time getting the trademarks, a lot of time registering the patents, agonizing with the patent offices and the trademark offices, and we get that certificate and we put it in the drawer and we lie awake at night thinking, you know what, I think the suppliers are still ripping me off. So then when we appoint new suppliers, we do a bit of due diligence. We may check on things then. We put that in the drawer, and then we don't do any further due diligence in a lot of companies. And basically, we just wait for something horrible to go wrong, don't we? So I know we have a number of the Turkish law enforcement officials here, and some from many other countries, the WCO and the Interpol, and a lot of you do the enforcement. We're very good about ringing you when we have a problem. And we're very good about going to court and fighting our rights and really trying to get the horse after it's left the barn door. Is there something more that we can be doing? So I've been working with a group called Create.org, the Center. I'm sorry, I'm just joking here. The Center for Responsible Enterprise and Trade. I should have brought my water over as well. And Create.org is doing some new thinking about the things we can do with our supply chain in order to manage it better over time, to measure the problems, thank you, to improve the situation before it gets to law enforcement or a legal situation. So just to give you a little flavor of the kind of things we're looking at, a lot of our companies have already got programs in place to deal with quality control. You have very slick quality control systems. You have very sophisticated environmental rules checking procedures. If there's a bribery problem in your supply chain, you've got oftentimes measures in place to try to deal with that. There are very good controls in some companies about labor standards. We check, we measure, we improve, and we, over time, encourage our suppliers and the others in our supply chain to improve their practices in these areas. And that's exactly the kind of thing that Create.org and some of the people I've been working with are looking at and doing at the moment, and that is between the papers being signed and the due diligence being done on one side and the need to call in law enforcement or the lawyers on the other side to, on a regular basis, measure and improve. And again, not the expensive sort of mammoth due diligence that I know a lot of us do when we do a deal. But we've been working on annual online self-assessments that the suppliers, the people in the supply chain can take these self-assessments, fill out the forms, and have an assessment on how they're doing in many areas of relevance. We also have built into the Create pilot that we're doing at the moment an independent evaluation that we're doing actually with each of the suppliers at the moment, but that would be done on a random basis in the full program. And really starting from the very beginning, once the measuring is done, to start to show and train and share things with suppliers on how to improve in various areas so that next year when they do the self-assessment, they've actually got more in place. Just to tell you, the kind of things we're interested in and are looking at are things that a lot of companies really don't know about their suppliers. What are their IP policies? What are their IP procedures in place? Do their contracts with their employees and their contractors actually cover these kind of things? Is anybody in charge of IP at the suppliers area? How are they picking suppliers? Are they putting in place protections with the subcontractors that they're bringing in? What kind of physical security do they have? Is there a lock on the door? Is the stuff going out the back door? Are the computer systems secure? Are they putting pirated software on and sending your information out to hackers? All these kind of management system things we're thinking are a good, effective, not horribly expensive way to not just check once and worry, but also just to have a measure and improve system of the kind we use in so many other areas. We've got a lot that we can do to improve our relations with our suppliers, with our relations with our supply chain, and also in improving the situation so that maybe we could sleep a little bit better at night and have to call these nice people at law enforcement maybe slightly less often. Thanks very much.
So many thanks to each of our speakers. I think we have a little bit of time for questions. Who'd like to go first? One over there. Thank you, sir. I assume we have a roaming mic. Do we? There you go.
Hi there. Max Better from the ICC International Maritime Bureau. I was interested, we work with shipping companies and have done for 30 years or so doing due diligence regarding fraud. I'd just like to ask the panel, I've talked to them about the counterfeiting issue in terms of them being intermediaries. They recognise it as a problem. I'd like to ask the panel really, they feel the brand holders should also be involved in the whole process. So I'd like to ask the panel how they feel that is best done to collaborate between the shipping companies and the brand holders to stop the trade.
Darcy, that may be one for you.
Is this on? Okay. Thank you. It's true. I painted somewhat of a grim picture, but there is a lot of cooperation now with brand owners and the shipping agencies, so that when brand owners find that somebody has been counterfeiting their product and using the shipping industries, they're reporting it to the shipping companies, the vessel companies, and they're working together. So there has been some inroads, especially since the last conference 2 years ago, and I think the ICC would play a pivotal role in that, is being almost like a clearinghouse, so that when we find the product is coming in, we could go to the ICC that work with the vessel companies. The vessel companies, when they have suspicions about some of their clients, they could go to you to engage in some of the due diligence, and there we have our middle ground. What I'd like to see in future conferences is some of the vessel companies actually here, because there has been progress made, and my job is to make it faster.
Okay, thanks, Darcy. You have a question at the front here?
Thank you. Simona Lavagnini from Italy. I'm a lawyer. I was wondering whether you ever experienced a problem with shipping companies in relation to privacy. I mean that we have had a few cases in which we found products that were clearly infringing IP rights. At the same time, the shipping company opposed the right to privacy and refused to provide any kind of information as to the source of the products unless we obtain an order from the judge previously. And this, of course, has a lot of negative effects on enforcement, because you have to go to court, you have all the costs, and also all the delays. So I was wondering whether this is an issue that has been thought about before.
Well, you know, all criminals want a right of privacy. I mean, that's the whole point. You've got to get around it. And if that means you've got to go to court and set a precedent, go to court, spend the money. Because if you just walk away from a challenge like that, then every crook in the world is going to say he's got a right or she's got a right of privacy. So you've got to stand up for your rights. It's going to cost some money, but it's going to cost a lot less money if you challenge them in a court and work with the media on this than just walk away.
Just to supplement that, obviously there are different ways of dealing with that in different countries. And of course, within the EU, there are ways that are being proposed to improve that access to information and data at the customs point. But ultimately, as Darcy was saying, if it's written into the contracts with the shipping companies that there's a cooperation level as your supply chain partners, then there's a contractual override of the legal position if it happens to be a trouble in that market. Now, clearly, you can't have contracts with everybody, but if there were a voluntary code of conduct or something of that nature which spawned some better practice, that could be a longer-term solution. Any other questions? One at the front here. Keep them coming until I'm told to get off.
Hi, great discussion. John Keogh with GS1 Global Office, Global Standards Body. Just a question for the panel with regard to stolen goods. The topic of data interoperability and sharing came up, which is very, very relevant. But we were approached last year by the European Retail Federation, and they talked about 10 billion euros of genuine stolen goods that are also shipped. So I just want to add that dimension as well. It's not just counterfeit, it's also genuine products that are being moved around. And this points to the criticality of sharing information across agencies, police, law enforcement, and other agencies, but also from industry as well. I had one conversation with a large brand owner, and they have a big problem with that. Typically, it gets written off to insurance, but information sharing is just so critical. And I just want to ask the panel maybe if they have comments on that, the genuine goods that are stolen, and how do you bring that into the whole concept of protecting the brand?
Daniel?
Yeah, I think from a tobacco perspective, it's not so much stolen goods we have an issue with, it's actually full duty paid goods. Them genuine article, fully paid for in one country, being shipped somewhere else, and then obviously you get tax evasion where they've been shipped to. But I think your point's absolutely valid. I think you've quite rightly highlighted there are all sorts of different dimensions to the problem. And the only way we can actually help, well, one of the ways we can help fix the problem to support law enforcement is to have that interoperability and that sharing of data between bodies, between brand owners, but also I think more importantly, giving your example, what we really want is to be able to get to the point where, whether it's stolen or whether it's been bought and shipped, you can pick up that genuine good and understand, well, who was the last person who handled the legitimate supply chain? Be able to work your way back and find out, well, where was it diverted? We can only do that if we have interoperability of data across, continents, across countries.
Yeah, and I have sympathy with the question because we talk about counterfeiting like there is a definitive evil here and then the good over here, and actually it's much more complex than that. So counterfeiters will get some genuine goods potentially through the grey market perhaps, through out-of-stock products. They'll have some high-quality stuff, some lower quality. Some of them may be some parts of authorised factories, some will be completely bogus factories. So the picture in any situation is quite murky. And I think the sooner we get to grips with the complexity of the supply chain and start to sort of mix some of these remedies up, I think we'll start to sort of make some progress. But it's not a simple black and white solution. Any other questions? Okay, so I think we'll wrap up. Thank you very much to our speakers. And look out for the paper I talked about, the BASCAP Intermediaries paper, for more food for thought on this topic. So thank you very much. Thank you.